Aileen Wuornos was born on February 29, 1956 in Rochester, Michigan, and by the time investigators finally caught up with her in January 1991, she had admitted to killing 7 men along the highways of Florida over roughly a 12-month stretch, beginning in November 1989. Her first victim was Richard Mallory, a 51-year-old electronics store owner from Clearwater, whom she met while working as a prostitute, and his death would become the center of everything that followed, since Wuornos claimed at trial that she had shot him only after he raped and tortured her, while prosecutors argued the killing had been driven by robbery rather than self-defense.
Let's say the cops were following you.
Yeah.
Let's say they were following you and they did everything that you're saying they did. Nonetheless, you killed 7 men.
Yes,
and I'm asking you, what got you to kill the 7 men?
And I'm telling you because the cops let me keep killing them, Nick. Don't you get it?
Not everybody is killing 7 people. So there must have been something in you that was getting you to do that.
Oh, you are lost, Nick!
After her arrest, investigators recorded a lengthy videotaped confession running close to 3 hours, later used against her in court, where she described the moment she pulled a pistol from her purse and shot Mallory inside his car. Her account shifted over time, differing between what she told police during that interrogation and what she later testified to at trial. And she said afterward that part of her motivation for confessing was protecting her partner, Tyria Moore, who had become a suspect in the investigation.
So
I was a hitchhiking hooker.
Right.
Running into trouble. I'd shoot the guy if I ran into trouble. Physical trouble. The cops knew it. When the physical trouble came along, let her clean the streets, and then we'll pull her in.
But
that's
how come
why.
there was so much physical trouble?
Wuornos was convicted of Mallory's murder in January 1992 and sentenced to death that same month, later pleading guilty or no contest to several of the remaining killings. She spent a decade on death row before her execution by lethal injection on October 9, 2002, at the age of 46, closing out one of the most extensively documented cases in American criminal history. In early March 2026, Vatsalbhai Pancha was making his way back to his apartment at a Gujarat Housing Board residential complex in Valsad, India, unaware that the elevator ride would nearly cost him his life. CCTV footage from inside the 14-story building, identified as Sardar Heights on Teethal Road, shows him standing in the cabin as it reaches his floor, the doors sliding open as he begins stepping out onto the landing. He had barely gotten 1 foot through the doorway when the elevator surged upward without warning, the doors still open, moving with enough force that Pancha struck his head and was thrown backward away from the cabin rather than being pulled inside it. That single detail, the direction he happened to fall, appears to be what kept him from being trapped between the rising elevator and the floor above. He survived with internal injuries, but was later reported to be out of danger. Residents said they heard a loud crash and rushed toward the elevator to find him hurt on the landing. The building's chairman later noted that maintenance technicians had visited the lift only days earlier over minor issues with its light and fan. And while a possible electrical fault has been cited as a preliminary explanation, no official investigation has confirmed the cause. The footage spread quickly once it circulated online, leaving residents in the building unsettled about an elevator that, until that morning, had shown no signs of anything more serious than a flickering light. On July 28, 2026, a magnitude 7.1 earthquake tore through Kumamoto Prefecture in southwestern Japan, striking parts of the region hard enough to reach the highest level on the country's seismic intensity scale, while Yatsushiro City recorded the second highest level, known as Upper 6. Inside Kumamoto General Hospital in that city, the timing could not have been worse. 4 surgeries were underway when the ground began to shake. Security footage from inside one of the operating rooms captured what happened next. The operating table trembled, equipment rattled violently across the floor, and two doctors moved immediately toward their patient, holding them steady as the room shook around them. A nurse was knocked off her feet by the force of it, yet she got back up almost immediately and opened a door to keep an evacuation route clear, all while the tremor continued. What makes the footage remarkable isn't just the shaking itself, but what didn't happen afterward. None of the 4 surgeries were abandoned. According to the hospital, every operation in progress that day was continued through the earthquake and completed successfully, with staff prioritizing their patients' safety over their own. The hospital later said it took pride in how its medical team handled the crisis under those conditions. In the aftermath, Kumamoto General Hospital suspended its normal operations temporarily as the region dealt with the earthquake's broader damage, before fully resuming services on August 5th, having weathered one of the more dramatic tests any hospital staff could face mid-surgery. In the early hours of September 23, 2009, one of the most audacious robberies ever carried out in Stockholm unfolded above a G4S cash depot in Västberga, when a stolen Bell 206 Jet Ranger helicopter descended and landed directly on the roof above the building's glass pyramid skylight. 3 armed men climbed out, smashed through the glass structure with sledgehammers, and began working their way toward the vault using explosives to force open secured doors along the way. Outside, the gang had already taken steps to cripple any response. They planted decoy bombs near a police helicopter base on Värmdö, delaying the possibility of an aerial pursuit, while scattering caltrops across nearby roads to puncture the tires of responding patrol cars. Around 21 employees were inside the depot as the robbers moved through it, though none were physically harmed. By the time they finished loading bags containing more than 39 million Swedish kronor into the helicopter, police had actually reached the scene, arriving while the men were still inside, but chose to wait for a tactical unit rather than move in immediately. The robbers lifted off and vanished into the sky roughly half an hour after they had landed. The helicopter was later found abandoned north of Stockholm, but most of the stolen money was never recovered. 7 men were eventually convicted, and after appeals, the pilot and 1 accomplice each received 8-year sentences, while investigators believed as many as 20 people may have taken part in planning the operation. On August 26, 2009, the LAPD released surveillance footage asking the public for help, identifying 3 people caught entering the grounds of Lindsay Lohan's Hollywood Hills home in the early hours of August 23rd. The camera showed them slipping through a gate and moving into the courtyard around 1 in the morning, their faces only partially visible, giving investigators little more than a shape and a direction to work with at the time. What made the footage significant wasn't obvious at first. Police weren't looking at a notorious crew with a name attached to it. Just 3 unidentified burglary suspects believed to have entered Lohan's house through an unlocked door, while she and her sister were away, ransacking the property and making off with roughly $130,000 in clothing and jewelry. It would take a confidential tip and an unrelated arrest before investigators connected the footage to Nicholas Prugo, who confessed and began naming names, eventually leading police to Rachel Lee and Diana Tamayo as well. That single burglary turned out to be one piece of a much larger operation. Between 2008 and 2009, the same group targeted the homes of Paris Hilton, Orlando Bloom, Audrina Patridge, Rachel Bilson, and Megan Fox, stealing more than $3 million in cash and belongings before the group, later known as the Bling Ring, was finally unraveled. Reports later suggested Rachel Lee had considered Lohan her ultimate fashion icon, and the break-in her biggest conquest of all. Just after 3:15 in the morning, on Tuesday, June 16, 2026, a group of masked men carried out a ram raid at the Nationwide Building Society on High Street in Ramsey, Cambridgeshire, catching the whole thing on the building's own security cameras. The footage police later released shows the men arriving before a stolen telehandler was driven straight into the front of the branch, striking it repeatedly until the machine reversed and tore the entire cash machine out of the wall. From there, the operation moved fast. The stolen ATM was loaded into the back of a truck, while 2 other vehicles waited nearby. And within moments, the whole group had disappeared into the dark, leaving behind a badly damaged storefront and a telehandler that was later found abandoned. Investigators said the thieves made off with tens of thousands of pounds, and Cambridgeshire police appealed publicly for dashcam footage, doorbell recordings, or anyone who had noticed unusual vehicles moving through Ramsey in the hours before the raid. The story took an odd turn less than a day later, when a strikingly similar attack hit an Asda Express store in nearby Burwell, again using a stolen telehandler to rip a cash machine loose, while 2 additional vehicles supported the getaway. Police confirmed they were examining whether the 2 raids, separated by barely 24 hours, were carried out by the same group, though no connection has been officially confirmed. On July 2nd, 2026, in Mukdahan province in northeastern Thailand, a group of Buddhist monks had been walking for barely 30 minutes into a 260-kilometer pilgrimage toward a temple in neighboring Ubon Ratchathani, when the morning turned into tragedy. Nearby CCTV footage shows them moving single file along the roadside as ordinary traffic passes by, nothing in the frame suggesting what was only moments away. Police say an 11-year-old boy had taken his family's pickup truck without permission, and driven roughly 10 kilometers before losing control of the vehicle. One surviving monk, Phra Sampong, later said the truck appeared to swerve before it struck the group at speed, and that he and another monk managed to leap clear in the final second. Others weren't as fortunate. 9 monks died, 5 of them at the scene, and the rest later in hospital, while 13 more were hospitalized, several in critical condition. The boy was taken into custody afterward, though police have not filed charges, citing his age and reports that he was in shock and initially unable to give a statement, with investigators and child protection officials working through how the case should proceed. What remains under investigation is exactly what caused him to lose control, and how a pilgrimage that had barely begun turned into one of the deadliest roadside tragedies the region has witnessed in years. On September 29, 2016, in the middle of a busy Manhattan afternoon near Rockefeller Center, a Loomis armored truck sat parked on West 48th Street, while its guards stepped away from the open rear for only a brief moment, one of them heading toward the cab to grab his phone. That gap was all 53-year-old Julio Novello needed. Surveillance footage showed him walking up to the truck, lifting a 5-gallon metal bucket weighing 86 pounds, and carrying it off down the sidewalk while pedestrians and traffic moved past him without a second glance. What made the moment remarkable wasn't just the theft itself, but the math behind it. Novello weighed roughly 155 pounds, meaning he was hauling more than half his own body weight in stolen gold, struggling with the load enough that a walk normally covering 10 minutes stretched into nearly an hour as he set the bucket down, picked it back up, and kept moving, before finally reaching a white Ford sedan. Investigators later believed he may not have fully understood what he was carrying, since the bucket held roughly $1.6 million in melted gold scraps, rather than anything visibly identifiable as valuable. The theft wasn't even noticed right away. The truck's driver only realized the bucket was missing when he sat down on a replacement one, the kind he normally rested his feet on during the route. By the time police released the footage that November, Novello had already slipped from New York through Florida and out to California, and it took until January 2017, with Homeland Security and Ecuadorian authorities working together, before he was finally caught at a beachfront resort in Ecuador. The gold itself was never recovered. On March 18, 2018, in Riverview, Florida, Ronnie O'Neill III attacked his family inside their own home, killing his girlfriend, 33-year-old Kenyatta Barron, and their 9-year-old daughter, Ron Nevia, who had autism and cerebral palsy and was unable to speak. His 8-year-old son survived the attack that night, carrying both the physical scars and the memory of what his father had done.
I am not sorry for something I didn't do, and I am not sorry for the things I did do.
The case reached trial in June 2021, and O'Neill chose to represent himself through the guilt phase, cross-examining witnesses directly, including his own son, who was 11 by then, and testified against him, describing how his father had hurt him. The jury convicted O'Neill on every count: 2 charges of first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and arson, delivering the verdict on June 21st. For the penalty phase that followed, O'Neill stepped back and allowed public defenders to take over his defense.
I'm sorry for your loss.
On July 23rd, Circuit Judge Michelle Cisco handed down 3 consecutive life sentences without parole, along with additional consecutive prison terms adding up to 90 years. Cisco told the courtroom that in her 19 years on the bench, she had never encountered anything like it, calling it the worst case she had ever seen, and saying the cruelty in the evidence would stay with her for the rest of her life. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and his known killings would eventually span 13 years and 2 states before his crimes were finally exposed in July 1991. His first known victim was 18-year-old Stephen Hicks, a hitchhiker Dahmer brought back to his home in Ohio in June 1978, shortly after finishing high school, and killed when the young man tried to leave. Then came a 9-year gap. Dahmer's next known killing was 25-year-old Stephen Tuomi in November 1987, after which the murders became increasingly frequent. He lured young men, many of whom he met in Milwaukee's gay bars and neighborhoods, back to his apartment, where he drugged and killed them.
Because I was angry with them, not because I hated them, but because I wanted to keep them with me. And as my obsession grew, I was saving body parts such as skulls and skeletons, and eventually I did turn to cannibalism.
What finally ended it was a man named Tracy Edwards, who escaped Dahmer's apartment in handcuffs and flagged down 2 Milwaukee police officers, leading them back to Dahmer's apartment. Inside, officers found Polaroid photographs documenting victims and dismembered remains, turning what began as an encounter with a man wearing handcuffs into one of the most disturbing criminal investigations in American history. Dahmer confessed to 17 killings, although only 16 ultimately resulted in murder convictions. In February 1992, a jury rejected his insanity defense. He was subsequently sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms in Wisconsin, followed by another life sentence in Ohio for the murder of Stephen Hicks.
I'd have the sleeping pill mixture already prepared. The person would drink it, fall asleep, and that's when they would be strangled.
He never served out those sentences. On November 28, 1994, fellow inmate Christopher Scarver attacked him inside Columbia Correctional Institution. Dahmer suffered fatal head injuries and died at 34. If you're still watching, you've already made it through half of today's countdown. Every case you've seen so far was captured in some form, whether through surveillance cameras, courtroom recordings, police evidence, or eyewitness footage. In many of these investigations, those recordings became the reason the truth was uncovered at all. If you're enjoying these real crime documentaries, subscribe to the channel because the remaining cases become even more unbelievable. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. And before we continue, leave a comment telling me which case has shocked you the most so far. In March 2025, a case out of Meerut, Uttar Pradesh began surfacing in Indian news coverage that would go on to dominate headlines for months. Centered on the death of a former Merchant Navy officer named Saurabh Halpjot, a husband and father, whose life ended inside the rented accommodation he shared with his wife. According to the charges sheet police later filed, Saurabh was killed on the night of March 4th, allegedly by his wife Muskan Rastogi, with the assistance of a man named Sahil Shukla, who investigators describe as her partner. The autopsy reportedly recorded 3 stab wounds as the cause of death, and police allege that afterward, Saurabh's body was dismembered and concealed inside a plastic drum filled with cement. Following the alleged killing, Muskan and Sahil reportedly traveled to Himachal Pradesh before the case came to light, and both were arrested on March 18th, then sent to judicial custody the following day. Investigators later told reporters that planning had allegedly stretched back to November 2023, based on digital communications between the two. Material suggesting an interest in occult symbolism was also found during the investigation, though police explicitly stated in their charges sheet, filed that May, and running past 1,000 pages, that black magic was not the motive behind the killing. As of the most recent reporting, the trial remains ongoing, with Muskan Rastagi and Sahil Shukla continuing to hold the legal status of accused, their case still working its way through court. On August 24, 2012, a powerboat carrying 7 people tore across the Lake of the Ozarks in Missouri, the kind of high-speed run that draws crowds to that stretch of water every summer. Everyone on board caught up in the thrill of open water and a boat pushed to its limits. None of them were wearing life jackets, and none of them had any reason to think the afternoon would end the way it did. Near the 22-mile marker, the boat slammed into a wake left behind by another vessel, and at the speed they were traveling, the impact sent the hull airborne before it crashed back down against the surface, with enough force to throw every passenger from their seats. Bodies collided against each other and against the deck as the boat rocked violently from side to side, and the footage, captured by a photographer working for a local station, shows the chaos unfolding in real time before nearby boats moved in to help. All 7 people aboard were hurt, 5 badly enough to be taken to Lake Regional Hospital, with injuries ranging from broken bones to more serious trauma among those thrown hardest. The driver, Marvin Carter III of Memphis, was later cited by Missouri troopers for speeding and imprudent operation of the vessel. Everyone survived, though the footage kept circulating online for years afterward, held up by investigators as a blunt reminder of how quickly an ordinary wake, barely noticeable at low speed, can turn into something capable of tearing a boat and its passengers apart. Deep in the forests and mountain trails of the Philippines, there's a kind of unease that outsiders tend to write off as nerves, the natural discomfort of unfamiliar terrain before sunrise, though the folklore surrounding those slopes has never treated it as ordinary. Generations of stories describe something that moves between the trees, something drawn to hikers who drift away from their group in the dark hours before dawn. The girl who posted footage from a mountain trip in March 2025 had no idea she was carrying proof of exactly that until she sat down later and watched the clip back.
Naliligaw kami, guys! Naliligaw! Wala ni mga kasama namin! Wala ni mga kasama namin. Kailangan namin silang habulin kasi maliligaw kami. Gagi, malayo na sila.
She hadn't been running from anything. She was simply trying to catch up with her group after stopping with a friend to take photos, mildly out of breath, mildly annoyed at falling behind. Whatever was behind her wasn't moving for the same reason. Reviewers who studied the footage, frame by frame, ruled out a shadow, a straggling friend, an animal, or a trick of low light, since the girl was certain she and her friend were alone on that stretch of trail.
Naliligaw kami, guys! Naliligaw! Wala ni mga kasama namin! Wala ni mga kasama namin. Kailangan namin silang habulin kasi maliligaw kami. Gagi, malayo na sila.
What remained was a shape entirely black against the darkness, solid enough to feel deliberate yet semi-transparent, with the path faintly visible through it in places. No face, no limbs, nothing the eye could resolve into anything natural. It stayed fixed behind them across several frames before disappearing all at once, rather than drifting out of view the way a physical presence would. The girl felt nothing in the moment, no instinct that something had closed the distance behind her on that trail, and only the camera she happened to be carrying recorded what her senses never picked up on. This case centers on a woman named Rosanna, who had recently settled into a new apartment in France and was working through the familiar rhythm of making an unfamiliar space feel like her own, learning which boards creaked underfoot and where the morning light fell across the room, keeping her cat close as she slowly built a sense of normalcy around herself. Within days of moving in, something disturbed that fragile routine in a way she couldn't immediately explain, though the strangeness faded quickly enough that she convinced herself it had been nothing more than the ordinary adjustment of settling into a new building. That sense of safety didn't last. Late one night, alone in the apartment, a doll she kept as a quiet decorative piece turned its head on its own, not from an uneven surface or a passing draft, but with a deliberate motion that suggested intention rather than accident. And from that moment, its attention seemed fixed on her, tracking her movement through the rooms whenever she walked past it. Two nights later, she woke to her cat, shrieking in a way that had nothing ordinary about it. And what she found when she went to investigate was enough to send her out of the apartment within minutes, without packing, straight to a hotel. She has not returned since, and whatever she encountered that night remains inside those walls, waiting in whatever position it was left in. On February 17, 2002, Francisco Javier Correa was on a family beach outing along the Strait of Magellan in southern Chile, recording the kind of footage families bring home from ordinary trips, the sort that gets watched once and forgotten in a drawer. He had a VHS camcorder running when something surfaced from the water that didn't match anything the family could immediately account for. An enormous shape rising slowly from beneath the surface, with a scale and stillness that Francisco later said no submarine could explain.
El día está precioso hoy día, precioso, ¿no? Sí, está al máximo.
Nada, es un espejismo que vimos.
¿Cómo apareció de repente?
No sé.
No se aprecia lo que sea. No.
The clip eventually found its way into communities focused on unidentified submersible sightings, a category of unexplained footage with a history stretching back through naval logs and fishing testimony, long before this recording existed. What gave the Chilean footage its weight was the ordinariness of its source, a family with a consumer camera capturing something they hadn't set out looking for.
Ay, tundió ya.
¿Posible que esté un submarino? No. Porque no son de esa forma. Y aparte que es muy bajo. Está muy bajo. Pero mire, oh, qué onda.
Está desapareciendo, ¿no? Que cada vez se va hundiendo más.
Explanations split along familiar lines. Some researchers point to a superior mirage, an atmospheric distortion capable of stretching distant, mundane objects into towering shapes along the horizon. Others argue the object's steadiness throughout the clip doesn't match how mirages typically behave, since those tend to shimmer and warp rather than hold form. More than 2 decades later, whatever rose from the strait that afternoon remains unexplained, and the footage still circulates without resolution. Some footage simply refuses to be filed away neatly, and a clip pulled from a channel that no longer exists belongs to exactly that kind of material, the sort that splits opinion not only on what viewers are watching, but on what lens should even be used to watch it. The video vanished for a long stretch before quietly resurfacing, passed along through uploads nobody can trace back to a true origin, arriving now only as second-hand copies, with none of the original context intact.
Ashhadu. Allah. Ilaha. Illallah. Wa
At the center of the recording is a young Muslim woman, and within moments it becomes obvious that the people surrounding her believe they are dealing with something well beyond physical illness. A religious figure stands over her with the bearing of someone summoned specifically for this task, and the room carries the weight of ritual rather than treatment, unfolding with a rhythm the participants clearly understand, even if the footage never spells it out.
Kecuali Allah. Dan aku bersaksi bahwa Muhammad utusan Allah. Wahai Idrus, kamu sekarang sudah Islam. Kamu mau ubah nama atau nama kamu yang semula Idrus? Idrus. Itu saja? Idrus.
He begins questioning whatever he believes has taken hold of her, and her response arrives in a voice unlike her own, naming itself, then pleading to remain, insisting it means her no harm, and only wants closeness with her. That specific plea echoes a familiar figure within Islamic spiritual tradition, an attachment that resists removal through affection rather than defiance, leaving open whether what surfaced was something separate from her altogether, or her own mind fracturing under unbearable pressure. On October 28, 2019, a man climbing Mount Fuji began live streaming his ascent, titling the broadcast, "Let's Go to Snowy Mount Fuji." He introduced himself on camera only as Tetsu. Mount Fuji's official climbing season had ended weeks earlier, in September, and by mid-October, a heavy snowpack had settled over the upper mountain. None of that stopped him.
危ない。そう、なかなか危ないここな。全て下山する。よし。岩を取る。やばい。よし行こう。斜面になっちゃってるな。
He climbed in ordinary street clothes, carrying nothing but a pair of trekking poles and the phone he was streaming from. At one point he tells viewers his fingers are going numb, then keeps climbing anyway. Near the summit, at 12,388 feet, he loses his footing, slipping, he says, just before the camera starts tumbling with him down the mountainside. It rolls and flips until the picture freezes and the stream cuts out. Viewers watching from home saw it happen in real time and called the police. Search and rescue teams from Shizuoka and Yamanashi searched through the night and into the next day, but the mountain and the weather worked against them. On October 30, 2 days later, they found a body near the 7th station, close to half a mile below the summit, badly damaged by the fall. His phone was never recovered, and his identity was never officially confirmed. The footage still circulates today, a record of how different a mountain looks through a screen than it does under your own feet. Gettysburg carries the kind of history that settles into the ground and stays there. Over 3 days in July 1863, more than 50,000 casualties fell across those fields, and the battle marked the turning point of the Civil War. People who visit still describe something hard to name, an atmosphere the place never quite shed.
Nora.
Yeah? Yeah?
Come here.
I'm charging my iPhone.
Come here.
In 2012, a video gave that feeling something concrete to work with. A woman visiting the wheat field at sundown with her daughter, using the camera for the first time, picked up the sound of fife and drums drifting across the field. She assumed reenactors were nearby. Gettysburg hosts them regularly, and started walking toward the sound. She found nothing. The music stayed just ahead of her for half an hour, moving like a procession rather than a fixed performance, growing louder as the light faded rather than fading itself. No stage, no reenactors, nothing behind any tree line she checked. She uploaded it without an explanation, simply because she didn't have one.
Can you turn off the call, please? Listen.
A second, separate clip from the battlefield shows lights flickering among the trees at night, appearing and vanishing with no motorcycles, no visitors, nothing nearby that could account for them. The people filming can be heard trying to talk each other through what they're seeing in real time, pointing, repositioning the camera, never landing on an answer. Given how many men died on that ground, charging open fields, bleeding out over 3 of the longest days in American military history, it's easy to see why footage like this keeps surfacing from Gettysburg, and why so few people who've seen it walk away with anything resembling closure. On November 26, 2008, 10 gunmen slipped into Mumbai by sea from Pakistan and tore through the city for 3 days, killing 166 people. Among them was 21-year-old Muhammad Ajmal Kasab, sent by Lashkar-e-Taiba to attack Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus, alongside fellow gunman Abu Ismail. The two opened fire on the crowded platforms before moving through South Mumbai, striking Kama Hospital, and later ambushing a police vehicle carrying senior officers, including anti-terrorism squad chief Hemant Karkar.
लाहौर में पहले काम करते थे।
क्या नाम उनका?
अमीर।
अमीर के बाप का नाम क्या है?
शबान।
शाबान।
हाँ जी।
और सरनेम? कसाब है क्या?
हाँ जी।
In the early hours of November 27th, Kasab and Ismail tried to flee in a stolen car, but ran into a police checkpoint at Gurgaon Chowpatty. Assistant Sub-Inspector Tukaram Umbal grabbed the barrel of Kasab's rifle with his bare hands. Kasab fired straight into him, and Umbal still refused to let go, holding on long enough for other officers to pin Kasab down alive. Ismail was shot dead on the spot. Investigators later found Kasab wearing a Hindu kalava thread, reportedly part of an attempt to disguise the attacker's identity.
He felt sick. He felt sick and he didn't know what to do. And then after that, he started to cry and all.
11-year-old Devika Rotavan is the youngest witness in the case against Kasab. He shot her in the leg at CST.
आप जब कोर्ट में गई उसको देखा सामने वो कैसे लग रहा था वैसे ही उस दिन देखा था वैसे लग रहा था
उस दिन के जैसे नहीं लग रहा था वो बहुत नीचे गिरा हुआ था पागल टाइप में ऐसा लग रहा था कोई एक मारेगा गिर जाएगा
Jail officials told NDTV that in custody Kasab on occasions displayed signs of schizophrenia like scratching against the wall and eating cement. So is he mentally disturbed as his behavior at times seems to suggest a master strategist.
Kasab stood trial in a special court in Mumbai, starting April 2009. In May 2010, he was convicted and sentenced to death on 5 counts, with 5 life terms added on top. The Bombay High Court confirmed it in 2011, and the Supreme Court upheld it in August 2012. On November 21, 2012, he was hanged at Yerawada Central Jail in Pune. Terry Radford was 87 years old and had spent years looking after his wife through severe dementia. She had died 7 months before Good Friday 2019. He had 3 foreign holidays booked for later that year. On the morning of April 19th, he was standing at a bus stop on Worcester Avenue in Mansfield Woodhouse. Gavin Collins had been released from prison the day before.
Come on, let's go, bro. Let's go. Now you taught me to drive. Watch me go now. Hey. Hey, please, don't go. Oh, you're helping me. Good, keep it going. Cause it's Good Friday. And you know what, you so getting rid of all the coppers.
A friend who collected him from the gates noticed immediately that something was wrong. Collins was speaking strangely, his behavior confused and erratic, in a way that worsened through the night. By the following morning, he had entered a neighbor's house and started unplugging appliances, claiming they were connected to the devil. He stole car keys from another house and drove off. Over the next 30 minutes, he crashed into a house in Skegby, forced his way into a passing woman's car and drove off in it, crashed that one too, broke into a home where a mother and children were eating breakfast, drew crosses on the children's foreheads in his own blood, threatened their lives until their mother handed over her keys, and drove to Worcester Avenue.
I'm getting stronger and stronger by the second!
He reversed onto the pavement and crushed Terry Radford against the bus shelter. When he got out of the car, he said he had killed the devil. Collins was convicted of manslaughter and given a life sentence. The dashcam footage that documented the rampage also documented why it should never have happened. While still in prison, he had been flagged as a risk to others, set fire to his cell twice, and attacked a staff member. His early release should have been blocked. It wasn't. 20 cases, 20 moments where a single piece of footage changed everything. In some investigations, the recording identified the person responsible. In others, it exposed mistakes, answered questions investigators couldn't solve, or preserved the final moments before lives changed forever. Without those cameras, many of these stories would have looked very different. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe to the channel for more real crime cases, remarkable investigations, and true stories where the evidence tells the story. Leave a comment below with the case that stayed with you the longest, or let me know which real case you think deserves to be covered in a future video. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the most important witness isn't a person, it's the camera that never looked away.